Everybody ready? It's all set. Good morning. As you know, I'm Craig Stedman, District Attorney in Lancaster County. I'm here today with the United States Attorney for the Eastern District of Pennsylvania, Bill McSwain. Also, FBI Assistant Special Agent in Charge, Joe Bushner. I have two Assistant United States Attorneys, Mark Miller and Tim Stengel. I also have the Chief of Lancaster City Police, Jared Berkeyheiser, Chief Kent Schweitzer, the Chief of my department, and I believe Frank Capicella, I'm sorry, and didn't get to meet him as we were talking this morning. So I'm here to introduce the United States Attorney, and he'll be talking about a significant case and arrest that was made today, and I'll defer to him. I just want to make a couple comments before I turn over the microphone to him. First of all, I want to thank him for coming, and I want to point out a contrast. In the 8 years under the prior administration, not only did the U.S. Attorney never come to Lancaster, but I actually had really almost no communication with him. Who your prosecutor is at a county level, who your DA is, who your United States Attorney is, absolutely makes a difference for you and for your community and for the public safety. And Bill McSwain has been a tremendous partner in the year and a half he's been there, and we've seen a complete reinvigoration and strengthening of partnership as never before between our offices, and that makes a difference to the people who live and abide the laws and want to be safe. Just the fact that he's here with his staff is a testament to what he's doing. We have open lines of communication. He's assigned the two assistant U.S. attorneys to Lancaster County, which is an amazing thing. These are tremendous individuals. I know them both personally and professionally. Mark Miller has been serving us actually for many, many years in the dual capacity in his federal role, as well as prosecuting some homicides for us, and the famous Brianna Pratt, 7-year-old who was shot about 10 years ago, and handled that as well. And Tim Stengel, I know as well, and is doing some great work, and it's my understanding he's assigned to this case, and we're confident in his work and truly appreciate the work you gentlemen do and the leadership. And that's really what it is, the leadership of Bill McSwain. He is making a difference here in Lancaster. We continue to work together on cases. The ones that the most recent ones you'd be aware of would be the arson in City Hall, as well as the Smith Call case. All defendants in those cases, of course, are presumed innocent. But we've had a great partnership over the years, and it's stronger than it ever is before. And I want to thank the U.S. attorneys, and I'm going to turn it over to them, and in fact, Mr. McSwain at this point in time again to make the announcement. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Greg. Thank you. I'm delighted to be here today with all of you, and as Craig said, we've got a great partnership. And in fact, even before I became U.S. Attorney, we spoke to each other. I reached out to Craig. He told me about what things were like on the ground here in Lancaster. I told him about some of my priorities and what I wanted to accomplish as U.S. Attorney. And it's been very gratifying that in my year and a half as U.S. Attorney, we've been able to really put a lot of positive things into action, and with more to come. So I know that prosecuting and reducing violent crime is one of Craig's top priorities and is at the forefront of everybody's mind, given some of the uptick in violent crime that we've seen recently in the county. And it's a pleasure to work with the district attorney who shares the same priorities that I have. And I think together, our offices, the U.S. Attorney's Office and the District Attorney's Office here, we're a force multiplier for the public good. So I'm here today to provide a bit of an update in general about what we're doing in Lancaster and what we hope to do in the future, and also to make an announcement about a particular case that was recently indicted. So first, I'm going to begin with the announcement. On July 11th, 2019, so yesterday, my office charged Gregory Dow of Lancaster County by federal indictment for sexually abusing young girls residing in an orphanage he operated in the Republic of Kenya. Now, he was charged with 4 counts of violating a federal criminal statute, specifically 18 United States Code, Section 2423, which prohibits individuals from engaging in and attempting to engage in illicit sexual contact with a minor in foreign places. Now, if the defendant is convicted, he faces a possible maximum sentence of 30 years imprisonment. Now, he allegedly traveled from Lancaster County to Kenya in 2008 and started what came to be known as the Dow Family Children's Home. He did so with the financial support of his church and other organizations. And by the time the orphanage closed in September of 2017, the defendant is alleged to have sexually abused at least 4 young teenage girls who lived there. Now, a team of field agents from the FBI, assisted by local authorities, arrested the defendant early this morning without incident. He is currently in federal custody, awaiting his initial appearance before a United States magistrate judge in Philadelphia. Now, early this morning, my office also filed a motion seeking the defendant's pretrial detention. If we prevail on that motion, the defendant will remain in custody until he stands trial on these charges. This case, I want to point out, is part of Project Safe Childhood, which is a nationwide initiative spearheaded by the Department of Justice. We have lots of cases that come under this umbrella of Project Safe Childhood. Created in 2006, Project Safe Childhood combats the growing epidemic of child exploitation and abuse. Now, cases like this do not come together, and criminals are not apprehended without a significant amount of coordination and cooperation at all levels of law enforcement. I want to thank in particular the FBI Philadelphia Field Office for their tireless work investigating this case. In particular, FBI Special Agent in Charge Michael Harpster and FBI Assistant Special Agent in Charge Joe Bushner. I want to thank them for their leadership, and I want to thank Joe for being here today, and he is going to share some remarks at the conclusion of my statement. I also want to thank the Lancaster City Bureau of Police and its Chief of Police, Jared Berkeyheiser, as well as the Chief of Police of the East Hempfield Township Police Department, Stephen Skiles, for their assistance in effectuating the arrest early this morning of the defendant. I also want to thank Assistant U.S. Attorney Tim Stengel from my office. Greg spoke about Tim's role, and Tim is assigned to this particular case and he is prosecuting it, but I also want to thank him for his commitment to Lancaster County in general. And I want to thank Assistant U.S. Attorney Mark Miller, that Craig also mentioned, for joining us today. So Mark and Tim actually live in Lancaster County, which I think is terrific. They work in Philadelphia, but they make the long commute from Lancaster County to Philadelphia every day, or almost every day, unless they have reason to be out here all day and interviewing witnesses and the like and doing the things that are part of their job. But normally they are making the long commute in Philadelphia, working the cases they need to work to make sure that the entire district is protected. It's a priority of mine to make it clear to the people of the district that this is not just the District of Philadelphia. It's not a federal district that is just concerned with Philadelphia. It is a 9-county area. The 8 counties that surround Philadelphia are just as important as Philadelphia County. Lancaster County is very important to my office. And one of the ways that we've shown that is that we have 2 assistant United States attorneys who live here, who love this county. And when you live in a county, obviously you know that really creates a bond. It really makes you care about your community. So I think we're very fortunate that we have 2 assistant U.S. attorneys that really focus on Lancaster, and then lots of other people in our office also assist with Lancaster cases. But when there's an important Lancaster case, certainly my first thought is, where's Mark, where's Tim? Do they have time to work on this case? Because I know that they'll give it 100%. Now, at the office, my priority is to enhance and ensure public safety in the communities that we serve. And I want you to know that together with our local, state, and federal partners, we are working hard on that front. And the proof of that is that we are investigating and we are prosecuting more cases than ever in our office right now. In addition to the case that we're talking about today, there have been several recent cases involving Lancaster County that I think serve as excellent examples of our commitment to this area. They highlight how our collaboration with the DA's office serves the community. So I just want to touch on a little bit of the facts about some of the recent cases that we've done. This past April, my office, working with the DA's office, adopted and charged a violent crime case that was originally investigated by the Lancaster City Bureau of Police. The defendant's name was Suleiman Washington. He is of Harrisburg, and he was charged with carjacking after he terrorized an 85-year-old victim by committing a carjacking at knife point in Lancaster in October 2018. And the defendant has already pleaded guilty in that case and is scheduled to be sentenced in September. In May 2019, so just a couple months ago, again working hand in hand with the DA's office, my office adopted and charged 2 men in connection with the arson that took place at Lancaster City Hall that the DA mentioned in his remarks. The federal indictment alleges that Dwayne London and Patrick Baker violated 18 United States Code section 844I, which is the federal arson statute. The fire allegedly set by these defendants destroyed irreplaceable wooden doors manufactured in the 1800s, artifacts that are part of the city's history, and the defendants remain in custody until their trial, which is scheduled for October of 2019, and if convicted, they could face up to as much as 20 years of imprisonment. Third, on June 27th, 2019, just a couple weeks ago, in close coordination with the DA's office, we indicted 2 additional individuals who allegedly attempted to rob Smithgall's Pharmacy in Lancaster in October of 2018. Now, in February of 2019, we had charged Brandon Glett and Andrew Garrett, and on June 27th, we charged additionally Johnny Straining and Lamar Black, so a total of 4 people have been charged in that case with attempted robbery with interferes with interstate commerce and brandishing a firearm during a crime of violence. Now, these defendants are all currently in custody awaiting trial, which is tentatively scheduled for later this summer. And finally, just this past Monday, July 8th, the Lancaster man, Tyshawn Williams, was indicted for illegally possessing a stockpile of 27 firearms and ammunition, including shotguns and rifles, despite being a convicted felon who was prohibited from possessing weapons. If convicted, he faces a maximum possible sentence of life imprisonment, including a 5-year mandatory minimum sentence. Now, Mr. Williams is actually appearing in federal court later today for a detention hearing where we will ask the court to hold the defendant in federal custody pending trial. Now, the cases that I've just highlighted are part of the Department of Justice's Project Safe Neighborhood program, which brings together all levels of law enforcement to serve the communities, to reduce violent crime, and make our neighborhoods safer for everyone. And truly, none of these cases would have come to fruition without the assistance of our local law enforcement partners here in Lancaster. But I also want to point out that my office is not exclusively focused on criminal cases. Maintaining the community safety also requires us to use civil enforcement tools that we have at our disposal to ensure compliance with federal law. So I want to just briefly highlight 2 civil cases that my office has recently worked on that have Lancaster connections. And really focusing on the civil cases as well as the criminal cases ensures that companies and individuals all comply with federal law. So first, in April 2019, my office filed a civil action against Miller's Organic Farm in Burdenham, Pennsylvania, to stop the farm from allegedly misbranding its meat and poultry products and from evading the nation's food safety laws. In our complaint, we allege that Miller's is processing, storing, selling, and transporting meat, poultry, and other food products that require inspection to ensure consumer safety. And on June 26, just 2 weeks ago, my office announced a monetary settlement in which Penn Medicine agreed to pay $275,000 to the United States government to settle allegations under the False Claims Act, which is one of the main statutes that we use in our civil division to make sure that federal money is being spent appropriately. And my office's civil lawsuit alleged that Lancaster General Hospital's Division of Maternal Fetal Medicine, and that hospital is part of the Penn Medicine system. It alleges that the hospital submitted false claims to Medicare for certain obstetric ultrasound studies, that because of the extreme delay in completing the reports, these were not reimbursable expenses, even though they were submitted as such. So this alleged conduct not only demonstrated an abuse of the Medicare program, but also had troubling implications for patient care, because ultrasound reports must be completed in a timely manner in order to manage sometimes high-risk pregnancies. So in closing, I want the Lancaster community to know that even though my office may be headquartered in Philadelphia, we are out here as well. And my entire office works to bring justice to every corner of our district, from Philadelphia to Lehigh County to right here in Lancaster. So with that, I would like to introduce FBI Assistant Special Agent in Charge, Joe Bushner, to share some of his thoughts. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I will keep my comments brief, and then I'll actually open it up for some questions that you might have to the current investigation that was cited by our U.S. Attorney. You heard your own county prosecutor and U.S. Attorney say a lot about partnerships, and I just want to echo that the FBI is extremely appreciative of the strong partnerships we have out here in the Harrisburg area of operations. We have our own office here in Harrisburg. Thank you to Frank Apicella, who's here today, and his office for the good work that they did on this case. I want to also thank the Lancaster City Police Department, the Lancaster County Prosecutor's Office, the East Hempfield PD, as well as the Kenyan National Police and our Legal Attaché Office, because operating overseas always presents its difficulties, and the Kenyan National Police were extremely cooperative in us having justice in this situation. I just want to echo a few general comments, which is the FBI is fully committed to targeting and tracking and locating anybody and arresting them who travels overseas as a U.S. citizen to target and abuse kids. It is one of the most heinous crimes, going out and actually sexually abusing young children, and we're committed to tracking them down and finding them. The Bureau uses a very victim-centric approach when it comes to these cases, and we're really going to make sure that we find any of these perpetrators and bring them to justice. Concerning the current investigation on Mr. Dow, before I open up for questions, because I'm sure some of you are thinking this, the background of the case, obviously I mentioned that we worked with overseas partners. It was not only our legal attaché, but the Kenyan National Police. We do know that there was a minimum of 4 victims over there in this orphanage that was operated by Mr. Dow, and there was likely other victims. But as you can imagine, in Kenya, it's difficult to track the full extent of that and where some of these children have since gone. But there was a lot of legwork involved in this investigation, a lot of foreign travel, and a lot of great work done by investigators. And at this point, I'll open it up for questions.
Before I ask a question, could you give us the spelling of his name and age? Would you have that? Or?
It's a Mr. Gregory Dow, D-O-W,
okay.
Exactly. And approximate age, he's in his 60s.
60 years old.
60 years old.
Yes.
Can you just tell us a little bit about his background here in Lancaster? And you say the orphanage may have been affiliated with a church?
Well, what happened with that is, so you had him travel overseas to open up an orphanage. He traveled over there in 2008. They did it on some of their own funding and also some funding from some like minor church funding. So from 2008 through 2013, they were operating off some minor funding. From 2013 through 2017, they actually started building up a little bit more funding. We're not going to commit to the sort of churches that were funding that, but we will say we don't have any evidence that any of these churches were complicit in any way. They were just trying to do the right thing. So here you have somebody who was setting up a charitable organization that looked like it was set up to do good, and he was going over there and abusing children.
So you don't want to name the church he was
No,
affiliated with?
no, we would rather not do that, because we don't want them to look like, they're not complicit. We don't have any information on that. And at the point where the Kenyan authorities started picking up on this, and that's when he returned to the country because he realized they were looking into it. Any additional comments on that?
Just following up on your last comment, I will note that
Can
he was
you
actually.
slide over by the mic?
Certainly.
Thank you.
We'll just note that he was initially charged criminally in Kenya, at which time he fled the country
How did he flee?
by airplane.
Oh, just like before
He
people.
boarded a
got-
plane before he
got-
was able to be arrested, and
Yeah.
flew back to JFK Airport in New York.
Where was he arrested?
Where was he arrested in Lancaster County?
Yeah.
He was arrested at his, in East Enfield Township.
Can you give us a more specific area?
I'm not gonna go into that right now, but,
And that was on July 11th, or?
that was this morning.
This morning, that is
Yeah, he
That
was
this
arrested
morning.
in Lancaster.
This morning at his
He
home.
was.
Okay.
Was he charged specifically in relation to these 4 alleged victims?
Yes, he was. There's 4 counts. Each count contemplates the abuse of one victim.
And can you talk a little bit, can you provide any more detail about the orphanage? Is it hundreds of people living there? And what about the circumstances under which it shut down? Is that related to his arrest?
Let me provide one little caveat here, which is that we want to answer your questions to the extent that we can. One of the things that I think is really important, and one of the new things about our office is we're trying to be as transparent as possible with the public about what we're doing. But we are somewhat limited in the fact that we have some information that has already been a matter of public record and some information that is filed with the court that Assistant U.S. Attorney Stengel is at liberty to discuss. But there may be some things that he can't answer, and that's through no fault of his own. But with that in mind, Tim, go ahead and answer what you think is appropriate.
So what is the status of the charge that was filed in Kenya? Will that be removed, or have they handed the reins over to the US?
Yeah, I can't comment on an investigation in Kenya. We have no jurisdiction there. Whatever happens in Kenya will happen in Kenya.
What was he charged with in Kenya?
I apologize.
What were the nature of the charges in Kenya?
Again, I don't want to get into anything that's not on our public record right now, but he was charged in Kenya.
The one thing that is in the public record that Tim put into his detention motion, because I mentioned that we're moving for detention, so the defendant will be in custody in prison pending his trial, is that you are detained for basically one of 2 reasons. Either you're a risk of flight or you're a danger to the community. And so the fact that he fled charges in Kenya is a good indication, we think, that he is a risk of flight. So that's one of the reasons that we think it's appropriate that he be detained, and that's what one of the things that Tim's going to be arguing to try to make sure the defendant is in our custody before trial.
So you're just detaining him till you send him back to, extradited back to Kenya then?
No, we're detaining him in our case.
Okay.
So we have charged him in a federal criminal indictment here, and we're dealing with our case. I'm just pointing out that the defendant's history, if it's indicative of him wanting to flee, that's something we can raise with the federal judge as one of the factors that he or she should consider about detaining him for this case.
Can you describe the orphanage at all? What town it was in, the size of it, anything about the orphanage, the facility, and why it shut down?
Again, at this point, we probably can't get into exactly that because it's not reflected in our papers.
But as it happens, we will share that. And this is now a case that's been kicked off because the indictment stage is the beginning. It's the time that we share with the public what's going on. So we're going to be filing documents with the court. We're going to be appearing in court, in open court. All that's going to be public. And so when we can answer those kind of questions, we will. So I don't want you to get the impression we're trying to duck your questions. We appreciate your questions. We appreciate your interest. But there's just different stages at which we can share certain information.
What was the name of the orphanage? Can you tell us that?
We're actually not going to get into that either. That's not.
I thought you did say Dow family.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
other than the information that I already provided in my statement, we don't want to get into more details about it.
Did he
You're
appear in
correct.
court this morning after the arrest?
No, he'll appear at 1:30 p.m. in Philadelphia.
That's the, okay,
Yes.
1:30 today in Philadelphia?
Yes.
And then where would he be detained or go to be held in prison?
He would be detained pre-trial in the Federal Detention Center in Philadelphia or another local prison that has a relationship with the Bureau of Prisons.
How did this investigation here start? Was it a matter of the Kenyan authorities reaching out to you saying this guy just took off?
And so this is, the role that we played here was we received information indicating, consistent with the acts that you're hearing about today. A person actually came into the Lancaster County District Attorney's Office, met with my investigators, George Bonilla in particular. Chief Schweitzer then contacted the FBI. We immediately saw that this was going to be a federal case, be far beyond our jurisdiction, and this is just an example of the partnerships the U.S. Attorney's talking about, and working on public safety. It requires local, state, and federal cooperation, and we're so fortunate to have that. And look at the reach of the federal agencies now. We're crossing an ocean for justice and safety for abuse. So that's how it was brought to the attention.
What was the time frame of that?
It was, Chief, you remember?
Last year.
Yeah, I don't.
2018.
Yeah, yes, sir.
Summer or fall.
Yeah, summer or fall of last year.
And I'm sorry, when did he leave Kenya, flee Kenya?
September.
Is that,
He fled Kenya in September of 2017.
and have you been looking for him then, set for, how did?
Yeah, again, don't want to get into too much of the background of the investigation. I will say that the FBI in this investigation conducted a thorough and aggressive investigation and did a phenomenal job.
Was the tip that you guys got, was he abusing girls here, that's why they came to the Lancaster County District Attorney, or this is happening in Kenya?
Yeah, it would be the latter. The tip was consistent with what they have charged.
You mentioned he got funding from churches, I know, and I put out plural, I'm not gonna, you said you don't wanna name them. Do we know how many churches?
Yeah, we're starting to get maybe a little bit towards the line where we're a little uncomfortable revealing something that would be inappropriate to reveal at this point. So why don't we just finish up with one or two final questions and we'll try to answer them as best we can.
You got a tip he was in Lancaster, or can you discuss at all how you came to the arrest?
Well, we know where he is. We were aware of his whereabouts. That was not a big issue finding him.
What town in Lancaster?
I just have a question right here.
Speak to the statute that he's charged with, 4 counts. How rare is this statute? How infrequent is it for this statute to be applied to a U.S. citizen who's working or doing something overseas?
I mean, it's definitely not unprecedented. It's not your average case, but I think just in general, the U.S. Attorney's Office has been very aggressive in the last year and a half in going after all sorts of types of child sexual abuse. Whether it's this kind of case where it involves going into a foreign country, whether it's human trafficking here in the district, whether it's child pornography, all these things come under the umbrella of prosecuting aggressively these types of cases and protecting what we consider to be some of the most vulnerable victims. And our office does more cases compared to other big offices around the country, by a long shot. If you look at the other offices of our similar size, New York, Chicago, California, and the like, they do a lot of child sexual abuse cases as well, but we've made it really one of our signature initiatives. And so I was actually looking at some data the other day comparing our case mix to other offices, and we are really a leader in this. But this particular type of case, where you're dealing with somebody in a foreign country, that doesn't happen every day, but absolutely it's part of the menu of what we're looking to enforce.
I just want to follow up. You said about possibly more victims, and we'll try to put this out there for police in Kenya. But are we worried that there could be victims here in Lancaster County? Because you made the arrest in Lancaster County, so that tells me he was here.
I will say that in general, whenever we indict the case, there's still an ongoing investigation, and if anything comes to our attention, or comes to the FBI's attention, or comes to Craig's attention, or anybody involved, we will pursue it. So it's not like we put pencils down once the indictment is filed. It's just that right now, we have the evidence to charge what we charged. It's a continuing investigation, and that's also one of the reasons why we have to be a little circumspect about what we say here today.
What town does he live in Lancaster, and can you at least tell us